Racketeering can include a range of criminal acts such as fraud, bribery, money laundering, trafficking, sex trafficking, and more.
Including one instance of kidnapping during which Combs carried and displayed a firearm to a female victim, so that part is new.
Social internet was rocked by a viral video that claimed music entrepreneur Sean Diddy Combs passed out in court after learning he may get a life sentence.
As you all know, I made a request today for what we're calling a gag order, and I'm not going to walk out of court and do anything other than
listen to everybody, but you believe all proof.
Believe the facts.
This video is proof.
Hands down.
In a stunning courtroom appearance that left onlookers buzzing, Sean Diddy Combs, once a titan of the music and entertainment world, cut a shocking figure as he faced a laundry list of fresh allegations. The man who had once commanded global stages and red carpets now shuffled into a wood-paneled New York courtroom looking unrecognizable. Reports described his appearance as bloated and unkempt, with his tan prison-issued jumpsuit hanging loosely around his frame and a scruffy gray beard framing a face that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Gone was the polished magnet image of the Bad Boy Records mastermind. Instead, what stood before the court was a man visibly weathered by months of incarceration, legal battles, and public scrutiny.
At the end of the day, just to tell the truth, so hopefully we can get down to the bottom of this. I'm 100%, the charges against me are 100% false, and hopefully due to time, we're going to start to see that.
The scene unfolded to a packed gallery. Family members, including his mother Janice, and children sat quietly in support, their expressions a mix of concern and resilience. As Diddy entered the room, he greeted them with a faint smile and blew a two-handed kiss, a rare moment of warmth in an otherwise tense proceeding. But it wasn't long before the gravity of the situation took center stage. The hearing was to address the latest allegations against him, which painted a damning picture of a man accused of wielding power and influence in deeply troubling ways.
Pledged to give up his passport to prevent any quick getaways to tropical hideaways, and agreed to house arrest. He basically pleaded, "I'll stay locked at home. Just keep me out of jail." His lawyer also proposed regular illicit item tests, nightly visitor logs, and strict limits on female visitors, only allowing family members like his mom, daughters, and their mothers. Diddy was throwing down every card he had, doing whatever it took to convince the judge to release him.
Sean Diddy Combs ordered to stay behind bars. His lawyers offered up his Miami home, his mother's home, as well as collateral. Also, he would forfeit his passport, but it wasn't enough to keep him out of jail until trial.
Despite the impressive bail proposal, the judge refused to budge. And here's where things got dicey. The prosecution laid out a strong argument that Diddy wasn't exactly a guy you could trust to stay out of trouble. They dug into his past and revealed some pretty damaging information. One standout detail was a series of unsettling old texts. In one message from 2016, Diddy seemed desperate, practically begging for help. He'd just been seen on camera in a hotel with ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura, and in a panic he texted, "Call me, the cops are here. I got 6 kids, please call. I'm surrounded. You're going to abandon me all alone?" The text painted a picture of someone who could get manipulative when things got heated.
Here's the twist, however. The video is very deceptive. Despite the bombastic title, no collapse was seen and no life sentence was given. Rather, underneath the dramatic images is a tale of judicial wrangling, unrelenting allegations, and an intense legal drama that is barely getting started. As we dissect this situation, we want to know whether Diddy has been caught lying in court again. What evidence does the judge have, how serious these accusations are, and if his defense team can withstand the growing body of evidence. Let's go into the specifics that show the real mayhem that lies beneath the headlines.
Sean Diddy Combs was just hit with 2 new federal charges in his sex trafficking and racketeering case. With trial set to start in just weeks, we're going to break down what the government is now alleging with their 3rd superseding indictment, and also the government's new request of the court to protect the identities of certain alleged victims who plan to testify. When employees, witnesses to his abuse, or others threatened Combs' authority or reputation, Combs and members and associates of the enterprise engaged in acts of violence, threats of financial, reputational harm, and verbal abuse. These acts of violence included arson and multiple acts of kidnapping, including one instance of kidnapping during which Combs carried and displayed a firearm to a female victim, so that part is new, In addition, on multiple occasions, Combs threw both objects and people, as well as hit, dragged, choked, and shoved others. On one occasion, Combs dangled a female victim over an apartment balcony. Now, that addition, Nima, of female and female, to clarify that, this is not, I mean, in fairness, this is not a paper for my doctoral thesis where I want to make sure everything is as specific as possible. Why does it matter? Why do they have to add female victim? If aren't they gonna argue that anyway at trial? I don't understand why they had to be so precise there.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a female or a male. We're talking about RICO predicate acts, right? So obviously under the statute, you have to have 2 or more of these acts, and we've gone through them: kidnapping, arson, extortion, other crimes of violence. But it can be to a male, it could be to a female. I don't think that's going to change the case one way or another. So you're right, Jesse, it's not necessary to identify whether the victim is male or female.
The stakes for Sean Diddy Combs in the middle of this developing legal drama are quite high. There are more than simply a number of claims against him. They are a ticking time bomb that, if detonated in a conviction, could put him in prison for the rest of his life. Imagine having to deal with the breakdown of your empire as well as the terrifying prospect of spending decades or even your entire life behind bars. The threat of a life sentence looms over every court appearance, and some claim that the mere thought of it may have caused him to falter.
Sean Combs' trial fast approaching. Prosecutors are adding to their case, now hitting the former rap mogul with additional sex trafficking charges. ABC News' chief investigative correspondent Aaron Tursky is here with those details. Good morning, Aaron.
Hey, good morning, Tanae. Sean Combs is set to go on trial 1 month from today, and the case against him just got a little bigger. This morning, Sean Diddy Combs faces 2 additional criminal charges a month before he's scheduled to stand trial in New York. Federal prosecutors charge Combs with an additional count of sex trafficking and an additional count of transportation to engage in prostitution. Both relate to an individual referred to in court papers as Victim 2. Combs previously pleaded not guilty to 1 count of each of those charges, as well as the most serious charge he faces, racketeering conspiracy.
For Sean Combs, the challenge in this new superseding indictment is that any one alleged victim could amount to serious prison time. He would have to disprove each and every one of the 4 alleged victims, because if even one is believed, he could serve life behind bars.
Combs now faces a total of 5 federal counts that could get him decades in prison if convicted. His attorneys are downplaying the new indictment, saying in a statement these are not new allegations or new accusers. These are the same individuals, former long-term girlfriends who were involved in consensual relationships. This was their private sex life, defined by consent, not coercion. But the indictment says Combs lured women under the pretense of a romantic relationship into engaging in sexual encounters. And when he didn't get his way, prosecutors allege Combs kidnapped a woman, flashed a gun, and dangled a female victim over an apartment balcony.
Rapper Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking trial is now set to begin next year, and prosecutors are hinting that they could potentially bring new charges against the music mogul.
Janley Painter here with all the details. Jan.
Hey, Todd and Carly. So May 5th, 2025, that is the day Sean Diddy Combs' trial is expected to begin. And according to those inside the federal courtroom yesterday, Combs was all smiles, wearing a jail uniform and shackled at the ankles. And at one point, he turned towards the gallery, waving and blowing kisses to his family, who showed up to support him, including his mother and many of his children. Combs was arrested in September on several charges, including sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy, where he faces a possible sentence of 15 years to life behind bars if convicted. And during yesterday's hearing, attorneys discussed issues regarding the evidence discovery process, including the data extraction of nearly 100 electronic devices seized during searches of Combs' residences. Prosecutors making clear in court, quote, "Our investigation is very much ongoing," and they hinted that additional charges against the music mogul are possible. But here's what his defense team told reporters after court.
He's making an adjustment. He had his family here today to support him. We really want to put an end to all of the clowning that we see on the internet. This is a serious proceeding with serious consequences, and all of us are addressing it accordingly.
Combs is being held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn.
A superseding indictment that builds on his prior counts is at the heart of these accusations. Combs is now being accused of sex trafficking, racketeering, coercing, and abusing women. A sinister list of offenses that, if confirmed, would demonstrate systemic exploitation. According to the indictment, he coerced women into engaging in commercial sex acts by using his riches, position, and authority. In one particularly startling allegation, he reportedly hung a victim over a hotel balcony. These are not isolated occurrences. Rather, they are a part of a larger tale that points to years of abuse and manipulation.
Prosecutors in New York have filed their third superseding indictment against Sean Diddy Combs. The new indictment adds an additional charge of sex trafficking and an additional charge of transportation to engage in prostitution. That could mean additional prison time if Diddy's convicted. Chief Investigative Correspondent Aaron Katursky is here with more on that. So, Aaron, what's the latest on this indictment?
Third one. And these new charges, these new counts, he's already faced sex trafficking and the prostitution charges, relate to a different victim, a victim number 2. We don't know who that is, not identified in court papers, but we know there are a total of 3 alleged victims who form the basis of the criminal case against Sean Combs. So now with the additional counts, it brings the total number of charges that Diddy is facing to 5. So he's looking at the possibility, as you say, of extra prison time potentially if he's convicted of those.
So what's next in this case now? And any response from Diddy?
We haven't heard yet. We've asked Diddy's team for any kind of a response. He has previously pleaded not guilty to sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution charges, along with the big count against him, the racketeering conspiracy that exposes him potentially to the most prison time if he's convicted. His legal team, I would imagine, would say the same thing, that he didn't do any of this. And the next step is for him to go on trial. It's scheduled to begin on May 5th with jury selection and opening statements on May 12th.
Is it possible that this is all in reference to Dawn Richard? Maybe. Although I will tell you, she didn't, in her lawsuit, necessarily allege that she engaged in sex acts per se with Sean Combs. She said that he assaulted her. Although I will tell you, she did indicate in her lawsuit that Combs' assistant, so an employee, engaged in group sex with Combs and other men. But why add this specific paragraph in a superseding indictment, right? Well, maybe supporting her potential testimony as a key witness in the case, or whoever will testify. And what you are seeing, though, is how much prosecutors may be relying on forced labor to support their underlying racketeering charge. Remember, this is the main charge of this case. It's a charge that carries potentially up to life in prison. So they really, really want to get Sean Combs on this. And in order to get to racketeering conspiracy, count 1, prosecutors need to show underlying crimes to get to that charge, need to show the criminal enterprise. What were the illicit activities this alleged criminal enterprise were involved in? Forced labor may be a more straightforward way to get there. And to give you an idea about what we're talking about with forced labor, this is how it's defined under the United States Code. Whoever knowingly provides or obtains the labor or services of a person by any one of or by any combination of the following means, by means of force, threats of force, physical restraint, or threats of physical restraint to that person or another person.
To the possible use of the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations, or RICO, statute is among the case's most damaging features. It was first intended to destroy organized crime. RICO makes it possible for prosecutors to connect several illegal acts into a single comprehensive conspiracy. This implies that Diddy might be held liable for any crimes done under the purported criminal network's auspices if the jury finds him guilty of either leading or taking part in it. This legal approach raises the stakes significantly since it focuses on a pattern of activity spanning over 20 years rather than a single infraction.
RICO refers to the Federal Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, which is codified in 18 U.S.C. 1961 through 1968. RICO is the federal law that was originally designed to combat organized crime. It allows for both criminal and civil actions against individuals or organizations engaged in a pattern of racketeering activity. Racketeering can include a range of criminal acts such as fraud, bribery, money laundering, trafficking, sex trafficking, and more. And to prove a RICO violation, the prosecutor must first show that the defendants had an enterprise, and an enterprise is any group of people associated with each other for a common purpose. Second, there needs to be a pattern of racketeering activity, which means at least 2 acts of racketeering within a 10-year period. These are known as predicate acts. And third, there has to be a connection between the defendant and the management of the enterprise through the illegal activities. And passing the RICO statute wasn't so much about being tougher on any individual crime, but about being able to prosecute crimes that were often hard to prosecute. And the indictment says that, quote, the Combs enterprise consisted of Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, entities within the Combs business, including but not limited to Bad Boy Entertainment, Combs Enterprises, and Combs Global, individuals employed by and associated with the Combs business, and others known and unknown. The indictment claims the purpose of the enterprise was operating a global business in the media entertainment, and as part of that goal, the enterprise devoted itself preserving, protecting, promoting, and enhancing the power, reputation, and brand of Sean Combs. The indictment says Combs demanded, quote, absolute loyalty, and the people involved in the enterprise sought to enrich themselves, and Combs rewarded, quote, those who demonstrated loyalty to Combs and willingness to conceal his crimes. As to the third element, according to the government, Combs was the leader of the enterprise, and he directed his associates to, quote, lure female victims into his orbit, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship. Combs then used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sex acts with male commercial sex workers that Combs referred to as, among other things, freak-offs. Now, these next allegations are pretty graphic, so you might want to skip ahead to this time code if it might upset you. Now, Combs apparently recorded these freak-off sessions. The indictment says the freak-offs sometimes lasted for several days in a row. Quote, during freak-offs, Combs distributed a variety of controlled substances to victims, in part to keep the victims obedient and compliant. Sometimes unbeknownst to the victims, Combs kept video he filmed of victims engaging in sex acts with commercial sex workers. After freak-offs, Combs and the victims typically received IV fluids to recover from the physical exertion and to pull this off, Combs needed the cooperation of dozens of people. And the indictment says just about everyone in his orbit was in on it. Quote, supervisors, security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and other Combs business employees. These employees were responsible for the logistics, like booking hotel rooms, setting up lighting, stocking the rooms with lubricant and linens, arranging travel for the victims, and delivering IVs and cash. Now, you're probably wondering whether these people could face charges for participating in these events. Well, hold that thought because we'll get there. But during the freak-offs, the victims were subjected to serious physical abuse, including punching, kicking, dragging, and having objects thrown at them. At times, their injuries took weeks to heal. And Combs maintained control over the victims by, quote, physical violence, promises of career opportunities, granting and threatening to withhold financial support, and by other coercive means, including tracking their whereabouts, dictating the victim's appearance, monitoring their medical records, controlling their housing, and supplying them with controlled substances.
In addition, the latest charges include claims that he transported victims for prostitution and coerced a lady into performing sex acts for payment as recently as last year. The weight of the evidence increases with each additional charge, perhaps tilting the scales in favor of a conviction carrying the worst punishment. Life in prison. Imagine a situation in which each court appearance seems like a countdown to an irrevocable decision, where each new piece of evidence not only seals his destiny, but also presents a scathing picture of the guy he once was.
You put Johnny Depp on the stand, it's always a high-risk strategy. It worked for you. If you were representing Sean Diddy Combs, would you put him up?
Well, we put Johnny up because he was telling the truth. So that was a very easy decision to make, and he had the burden of proof. And frankly, we couldn't have stopped him even if we wanted to, but we didn't want to. And telling the truth as he did over several days, if you're not telling the truth, skilled attorneys on the other side are going to puncture that. So I believe in that system. I think in this case, I don't think he's got any choice. Given that video, he's got to explain it. He's got to say that he's terribly sorry for it, but that was an aberration. That's not who he is. He simply has to say that. He has to own it and say, I did a horrible thing. I'll regret it the rest of my life. But that doesn't mean that I engaged in sex trafficking. And he's got to look the jury in the eye and say that, and say it convincingly.
If he is found guilty of all charges, how long could he be convicted for? How long could he be sentenced to?
I'm afraid that he may never see the light of day. I mean, these are extraordinarily serious felonies that he's been charged with. So if he's found guilty on some or all of them, I think he'd be a very old man by the time he's out, if he gets out at all.
This conduct was going on for over decades, over 10 years, we know for sure. So it's very likely that the prosecutors are meeting with people, building their case, and it may be the situation where the prosecutors actually don't want celebrities to reveal any information, because it could be a situation where in court, it really tanks your case. If, let's say, hypothetically, you had Ashton Kutcher or someone say, yeah, I was attending the freak-offs during these period of times. This is the conduct I observed. He makes that statement in the media. Then when prosecutors are preparing for that case, well, the defense has great cannon fodder for cross-examination.
Right.
Let's say Ashton Kutcher makes that statement a year before the case goes. The defense now has a year to think about how they're going to cross-examine that witness.
Fair.
And that could make the case a lot worse for the government.
Or if he says something in the media that's contradicted by something that he said at another time. The question I would have is, celebrities are very private, obviously. Is there a situation where the government maybe got information from high-profile celebrities, but they will not reveal during the course of this investigation or even at a trial that they got that information from celebrity A or celebrity B? Like, in other words, they can get information from witnesses, but they don't necessarily have to call them as witnesses at a trial. They can use that information to find further evidence, right? So there's a chance, correct me if I'm wrong, that they may have spoken with celebrities, but we'll never know that those conversations happened.
Prospect of a life sentence is an absolute nightmare for a guy who once controlled the music business and created an empire with his charisma and power. The idea that decades of imprisonment may replace years of triumph and the glitter and glamour of stardom is such a profound change that it could weaken even the strongest determination. The burden of dealing with such serious allegations is evident even if there hasn't been any footage of a spectacular fall or a moment of bodily breakdown. Every courtroom conversation and legal strategy serves as a sobering reminder that a guilty conviction might have far-reaching consequences, not simply a short-term setback.
There's got to be something there in order for them to put themselves in a position with someone who is so powerful, who can retaliate, who has the authority and the means to be able to fight cases. To put yourself in that position, there must be something there.
Let's switch our focus to the government. In my opinion, I'm just going to say it the way it is. No friend historically of the successful black man, okay? None. And they start making this case, in my opinion, as a takedown of a successful black man.
I think what is interesting and what was surprising to me was when I read the indictment, I dissected the indictment, and I looked at count 2, which is the sex trafficking count, the sex trafficking by force, coercion, and fraud. It only names one victim.
Hey Cassie, how are you? How do you feel about all the allegations with Diddy going on right now?
And I believe that's Cassie, his longtime girlfriend. It only names that one victim, where there's so many women who've come forth with civil claims, looking for money, making allegations against them. Now, there's only one named victim in that count, and that's the count that everyone seems to be talking about, that he's involved in sex trafficking and he's using force and coercion. It's one named victim in that count, and that's surprising to me considering the amount of alleged victims there are in this case.
Do you think the fact that your client is a very big celebrity played a part in the Fed's decision to indict him?
I think it played the biggest part. I think it played a prominent.
Diddy made his choices. Diddy intentionally built a music empire based on exploiting people artistically, sexually, financially, and otherwise. This isn't one of those true crime stories where the person who committed a terrible offense can be looked at as a kind of sympathetic character because they only got that way from being abused or mistreated. Diddy intentionally spent his entire adult life preying on other people, taking advantage of people, and worst of all, literally torturing and abusing people. There's stuff that's coming out about him that's so disgusting it doesn't even sound real. He built a literal evil empire in the shadows of his fake, shiny, weird career that no one even enjoyed to begin with. I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, there are countless other controversial or just plain horrible things he's done throughout his life. One example that I didn't get to cover is Maze, one of Bad Boy's star artists and a legendary rapper who straight up left the music industry in the middle of his peak to pursue Christianity, later talking about how he had to escape Diddy. His story only adds to the long list of Bad Boy Records artists who had to leave the industry to get away from Diddy. There's even more though. In 1995, he was at the scene of and accused of being involved with a shooting that killed Jake Robles, a bodyguard from Death Row Records. He also brutally attacked Nas's manager in 1998. When he was included in a video that he deemed sacrilegious, Diddy stormed into the label's office and broke his arm and jaw. Even more recently, stories have gone around about him getting into a shoving match with J. Cole, punching Drake over feeling disrespected about a beat he wanted to use, and he was even accused of physically abusing an ex as far back as 2018.
So, How can we distinguish between the mayhem in the courtroom and the clickbait? Although the widely shared video may have shown a music entrepreneur visibly crumbling under the weight of his shame, the truth is far more nuanced. The accusations are grave. The stakes are very high for a guy whose whole career is suddenly in jeopardy, and the proof is overwhelming. This developing legal story is only made more complex by each new file, each dramatic courtroom incident, and each public statement made by his legal team. There is more to the story of Diddy being caught lying in court than just one instance. It concerns a slew of errors that are now being closely examined by a federal court.
The phrase you're looking for is credibility issues. And you've already laid down the first question every prosecutor is going to ask Diddy's experts. How much were you paid to be here? I was given $50,000 to be here. How many times have you ever testified for the United States of America? Never. Isn't it true you only testify for defendants? Yes. So you've been paid by Diddy. If you were saying something against Diddy, would you be testifying right now? Well, no. So really you're a hired expert. You're hired to give an opinion that helps Diddy, not the other way around. And that happens all the time with experts.
And then Diddy's defense can bat that exact same argument back against any experts the prosecution brings. So what, it becomes like a credibility tennis match? The other thing that I keep seeing is this phrase rebuttal experts that kept popping up in different filings. I think in this case the prosecution were talking about wanting a sex trafficking expert. So then the defense has a right to bring their own rebuttal sex trafficking expert.
The United States will go first. They put on their entire case. After they put their case on, and they'll say, we believe Mr. Combs has committed sex trafficking and this is why. They'll stop. Then Diddy's team goes. Diddy will put on an expert. The expert will get on the stand and he'll say, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've worked in law enforcement. I've worked for the federal government before. And everything the United States just said.
Every turn in the story, from the first raids on his opulent homes to the most recent claims of sex trafficking and bribes, illustrates the intricate relationship between criminal accusations and celebrity power. Every mistake in Diddy's narrative is exaggerated, and the courtroom turns into a battlefield where the struggle is as much about justice as it is about reputation. Every aspect of these allegations is being examined in light of the impending trial on May 5th, and every statement made in court carries the weight of a potential life sentence in prison, even though he has so far insisted on his innocence. The possibility of spending the remainder of his life behind bars is a terrifying prospect that highlights the very real human cost of this legal dispute.
So, circumstances might and probably do explain a lot of Diddy's behaviors, but they don't excuse them. In fact, the way that Diddy has moved his whole career, it puts him on a whole other level. Because even if Diddy was never exposed for doing what he did to the people in his personal life, the track record left behind in his career is horrifying. It paints a picture of someone who never did anything for any reason but to benefit himself, wanting nothing more than to look like a perfect hero who couldn't do any wrong, and pathologically sticking to that even if he had to ruin someone else's life in the process. That's not to say he wasn't good at what he did. Diddy only got to be so evil because he was clever first. He helped develop countless artists that made an impact in hip-hop and R&B history, some of which are still considered the best of their generations. He stands behind a long list of hit albums and songs, being basically born with a golden ear for music despite no formal training. He leveraged his ability for spotting musical talent to build his own level of celebrity, which turned into a vast empire spanning music, media, fashion. Despite his evil character, Diddy's talent in business was undeniable. That's how he got away with what he got away with for so long. With so many successful ventures like Bad Boy Records, Sean John Clothing, Ciroc Vodka, Revolt Media, among others, his business strategy catapulted him to become one of the wealthiest figures in hip-hop history, with a net worth that at one point exceeded $1 billion, making him one of the richest people to ever come out of rap. He even became a household name practically just off his charismatic persona alone. In the 2000s, people may not have liked his music, but they definitely knew his name. Ultimately, though, it was all for nothing.
Is this only another desperate attempt to hide a more sinister reality, or is Diddy really crumbling beneath the weight of his lies? If you're prepared to unearth every startling revelation and peel back the layers of deceit, might this be the last clue in revealing one of entertainment's most combustible legal sagas, or just another twist in a maze of judicial chaos? The truth is coming, so click the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Additionally, you won't want to miss a second.